We're now going to go ahead and start the questioning phase. The first subject will be the Constitution. The first person to answer will be Bill Benny, and Jerry DeLemus will handle the first series of questions.
Bill, the first part of this question is yes or no, and then it'll go on. Do you carry a copy of the U.S. Constitution? When was the last time you read the U.S. Constitution? And why do we need a Constitution?
Yes, in the parking lot, knowing you were giving me this question. No. Yes, I do carry a Constitution. I refer to it all the time. I really do. I believe that the Constitution...
Your mic's not on.
Yes. Does it work now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try it again. Yes, I carry a Constitution with me. No, it doesn't? Let me try it again. Jeff, can I trouble you for your mic? I'm sorry. That's what we need to start. Thank you. Obviously, I do carry a Constitution, number one. Number two, that's not fair. Somehow the clock, which was supposed to be 2 minutes, I want to use your clock because if... I'm kidding. Excuse me.
You start, I'll put it up.
No, that's all right. Go ahead. On your mark, it said go. I do carry a Constitution. It's very important. It is a document which tells us what our rights are, and it limits the government in terms of what they can do to us. So I think it is incredibly important. I think that the Constitution is a document written by geniuses so that idiots can live and work in government. I believe that the Constitution matters critically. I think that most of the answers for the problems that we're facing today were written, and the solutions were written 250 years ago. They're found in the Constitution. Sorry about that. And we'll get our mics squared away later. But thank you. Have I answered your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So the next candidate is Ovid Lamontagne, and the same question.
Same question, thank you. I'm lucky I have a working mic, I'm sorry about that. Yes, I do carry a copy of the Constitution. It's right here. You don't have to guess that I do. It's right here. And I read it all the time. I read it cover to cover before I decided to run for the United States Senate. I made my decision on November 9th. I've been reading a lot of the historical documents. Even though I'm a social studies teacher, you've got to go back to this document. This is not an historical work. It is a work that has real application right now for us, and it should. When Nancy Pelosi was asked, what's the basis, constitutional basis of Obamacare, you know what she said? She laughed it off. Go ask a serious question. That is a serious question. That is exactly the question we should be asking. As a legislator, I would ask 3 questions of any bill that comes before me. Number 1, is it constitutional? Number 2, does it make sense from a policy position to do this? And number 3, can we afford it? Constitutional question is the first one to ask. The Constitution, by the way, is not a living document. It's a limiting document. It's the supreme law of the land. It basically says to the federal government, you have certain enumerated powers. And in the 10th Amendment, it's clear that whatever powers are not expressly delegated to the federal government are reserved for the states and the people. And we need to reclaim the sense of federalism. We need to understand and help educate our fellow citizens that the answers to our domestic problems lie in the states and the communities of our country, not in Washington. That's what the Constitution provides. I will live by the Constitution, I will honor the Constitution, and when voting on a Supreme Court nominee, I'll vote for someone who's a strict constitutionalist, strict constructionist, not an activist judge like Sotomayor. Right. Thank you.
And the next candidate is Kelly Ayotte, and in anticipation of a mic.
Kelly, if you'd like, I repeat the questions.
No.
Oh, okay.
This is a question you can't forget, Jerry. And I confess to being at a little bit of a disadvantage here because they often don't have pockets in women's suits. Otherwise, I would love to pull out the Constitution, but I keep the Constitution with me. I have it in my car, and when I can't carry it in the otherwise inconvenient women's suit. But I can tell you that I read it very recently, and in particular in conjunction also with the health care bill. And there's a very important provision in that Constitution called the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which defines that rights otherwise that aren't enumerated are left to the states if they're not enumerated to the federal government. And that's a very important provision of the Constitution, and I think it's a provision that as a United States Senator, it has to be the first question you ask. Is this a role for the federal government, or is this a role better left to the states and the local governments closer to the people? And that is the first question I will absolutely ask as a United States Senator. And our Constitution, again, we have 20 states that are challenging the constitutionality of this health care bill, and many AGs have joined it. I said, absolutely, our state should have joined it. It hasn't. But that is an example of how the government has gone awry and not focusing on what is the role of the federal government. And I will do that as a United States Senator.
Well, yes, I do have a copy of the Constitution. And the last time I read it was last Saturday's debate, I believe. Somebody asked a question about Second Amendment rights. And so I pulled out the Constitution, and I was given 2 minutes for this answer. But I said, according to the Second Amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's pretty unambiguous. Now, this little document, which we've used to govern our country for 234 years, if you put it on 8.5 by 11 paper, it'd be no more than 15 pages tops. And that would include the Declaration of Independence. And we've run our country with this for 234 years. It's brilliant, it's brief. In many ways, I think it's divinely inspired. And I think what our founding fathers went through between 1776 at the Declaration of Independence and 1789, when our Constitution was ratified, was a series of nearly miraculous events or miraculous events. And that's why they stamped on their coins, "In God We Trust," because America almost didn't happen. And I look at what the Congress does today, and they can't do anything for less than 1,000 pages. This health care bill was 2,750 pages. Can you imagine that? Everything they do is 1,000 pages. How were we able to govern the country for 234 years with this little document? And yet the Congress can't do anything with less than 1,000 pages anymore. Well, I think part of it is, maybe it's the type of people we send to Washington. 2/3 of our Congress is lawyers, and maybe we need some people with some different skill sets. And I've been looking at our country going off course now for, I would say, 50 years. For 41 years, we've had consistent deficits. But for 50, I would say in 1960, and many of you are old enough to remember what our country was like in 1960. Last year, the Eisenhower administration, the 10 largest banks in the world were American banks. The 3 largest auto companies in the world were American auto companies. And every single industry you can think of, whether it be steel, petroleum, aircraft, heavy machinery, you name it, consumer durables, they were all American companies. And our country had just finished the greatest decade of prosperity in the history of mankind. And Washington was a little town. You could often go 2-3 weeks without seeing President Eisenhower on TV. And when we had a little government, we had tremendous prosperity. And haven't you noticed that there's an inverse correlation between, as the government got bigger, our industrial base declined, and the Northeast Quadrant became known as the Rust Belt? Well, we've got to get back to a smaller government. We do not need to spend $1 out of every 4 that's produced in America to govern ourselves. And I'm colorblind, but I can see that that's a red flag because it's up high enough. So I'll stop, but thank you.